Hello, I'm Dr. John Whyte, the Chief Medical Officer at WebMD. Implementing new technology in hospitals and clinics is a tough and often talked about challenge, but rarely mastered. At the Center for Innovation at Houston Methodist, a team of health and tech experts are not just talking, they're actively transforming healthcare through digital innovations. I visited Houston to see this innovation firsthand. Meeting with Dr. Roberta Schwartz, Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Vice President, she explained and she showed me how they're pioneering in this field. We delved into how she made this all happen, a combination of persistence and a little bit of luck. Why she's a glass half full type of person when it comes to digital tools, and why now is the critical time to rethink how we provide clinical care. Well, Roberta, thanks for having me here today.
It's such a pleasure to actually welcome you to Houston Methodist.
Absolutely, and I want to ask, how did you come up with this concept of an innovation center focused on some of the latest in technology, and specifically putting it here on the hospital grounds?
I gave a talk 6-7 years ago now, stood up and made a talk about the fact that other industries had transformed themselves or been transformed using the latest and greatest technology, data, information that was available to them. Could we do the same from the inside, or was it something that was going to be done to us? So after making this talk, a lot of people walked up to me and said, I want to be a part of it. And I was like, what is it? What are you coming to be a part of? And so not knowing what to do with all this information, I put a club together, and I didn't know what to put on the club title, so I called it the Digital Innovation Obsessed People. Why not? Nicknamed DIOP. People started showing up into the room, and literally was about 50% of the people who came were IT people and 50% of the people were operations people. I kind of got lucky. And then people started saying, well, I want to be part of the club, and I said, come on in. And then we started doing some real work. We said, okay, let's start trying some things. Let's start.
So this massive focus on innovation at Houston Methodist begins with Journal Club.
With a Journal Club.
And you forming a club.
Yes.
What did you see as the goal when you started? Was it to improve outcomes? Was it just to kind of be up to date in the latest technologies for patient care? What was that goal originally, and what is it today?
You know, we knew that healthcare, hospital-centric healthcare, is in the United States is a great system for some, and a good system for many, and a not so great system for others, right? But it's, in addition to that, it's very expensive. So one of the questions is, how can you make it a great system for lots at a less expensive cost, and what is it going to take to do that? Well, if you ask that question and step back, even within our environment here, you know that you have to transform the way we do our business, right? It's a very HR, heavy FTE, lots of people relying on people, not process, not necessarily underlying, the use of what we do with artificial intelligence or what we do with data. We're just not as sophisticated. So what we were seeing was healthcare organizations and these centers popping up around the United States where they were hiring people to go out and code and build products. And then we went out and started recognizing that all these companies were out there that were doing this amazing work, that were solving the problems that we had. As we opened up our door, they were like, hey, we got your problem solved. And I was like, well, if you already solved it, bring it on. Like, how do I get you in here very quickly? Which is how it ended up here on site, right? So our little journal club started entertaining the things we had heard, companies we had heard of, people who we had heard from. And the next thing you know, we needed a place to bring them in.
But you prioritized it.
Right.
Because real estate is an important commodity in a hospital, physically.
True. Now, admittedly, I got a little bit lucky. They were planning to move a demo site, really this tech hub, off-site, a series of buildings away. And I was decommissioning a inpatient unit that has shared bathrooms. No patients love a shared bathroom anymore. Jack and Jill is not something for the hospital environment. And so when we were decommissioning that, the question was, hey, could I take a series of rooms and just turn them into the tech hub? And the advantage of being on site is our clinicians could come over super easily and take a look at it and spend time over there and look through, hey, if I try out 3 cameras, could I do it in the span of 10 minutes over in the tech hub?
So when you evaluate these different technologies, how do you prioritize? Is it from the perspective of the clinical workforce? Is that first, or is it truly the perspective of the patient as we're talking about patient-driven care in the United States? Some would argue you can't do both. So how do you manage that prioritization in terms of how you evaluate these innovations and what you're going to implement here across your system?
So when you look at it, right, and step back, you have to, number one, they have to work. So that's something that while it seems very easy, and they have to be able to work in complex environments. This is not a simple, it's not I can touch every employee and train them in one swath, right? I mean, we're going to be training, even on a clinical level, 6,000 people, right? So you've got to do that. Third, they have to be culturally aligned with the things that we're doing. We are we have much less value payment system in the state of Texas than you have in a California. So there's different ways to evaluate, right? What is going to work here, and what is going to align with the payment structures that you have in town. Then you have to actually have something that's adoptable.
Let's talk about some of the programs that have come out of this focus on innovation. You mentioned the virtual ICU. Tell us a little more about that, as well as some of the other programs that really have, come from this focus.
The virtual ICU, when you look back, and I look at why, right? That the why is very important. Why? And give a lot of credit to Dr. Massoud, who was early on, Dr. Dalla, Steve Klein, a lot of people who were really early on in this program. Where we were looking out was the fact that the workforce of the future was not going to be quite as available as it was today. So we already knew we had a shortage of intensivists, and again, this is pre-COVID. So we had a shortage of intensivists, and we didn't have that many of them that said, you know what I want to do, work at night. I'm super excited to work at night. And so knowing that this was a waning workforce, we were filling it in with locums, we were struggling. We looked at a variety of different solutions for that virtual ICU, and turns out one of the vendors we had used for a different purpose raised their hand and said, we think we have all the information you want. If you add the algorithms, we actually think we have a solution for you. So now we had the technology, right? So technology and need. And the question was, could we put both of them together and change the way we staffed at the bedside? Everyone was great with the technology. Everyone was great for the everything. We were all pretty good until we got down to, could you staff it differently at the bedside? And that's when the wars erupted, and it was norming and storming of a very different and challenging level, and each one differently in the medical ICU, the surgical liver ICU, and our transplants, and our cardiac, right? They all beat to a different drum. You think you have one, and you think you have 7 community hospitals that all exactly look alike, and that was not necessarily true. You get into the details of, well, they also cover CERTs and the emergency room, and they put in the airways, so who's going to do that if they're not there? right? You can't just go to a tele. Oh, wait, now the emergency room doctor. So it became a very detailed set of work. And as we worked through that, some went easily, some were very difficult. Now, as we finished that work and we're getting ready to go live, we hung the last camera in February of 2020 on this site. I will tell you, by March of 2020, I looked like the smartest person that had ever existed in the universe, right?
Burnout's a huge issue in the health profession. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists. How does the virtual nursing program, the virtual care, is that one of the possible solutions to address burnout?
So yes. Short answer is yes. Now, virtual nursing is something that has proven to be quite astounding. The programs were really small. We were on that front end of blowing out a very large program and did it very quickly thanks to, again, already had iPads in the room, already had the technology there, right? The technology was there. We widened the lens on the technology and said, oh, we're using it for this, now let's use it, let's open the aperture, right? And make that available to everybody. So that program begins with a few people who, the nurses were saying, we have too much work, we're stretched, the ratios are stretched, help. And we went out to lunch one day and said, okay, let's talk about how we can help. I can't go to one more unit and hear one more person or look at them in the face and say, don't worry, tomorrow you're going to be back to normal ratios. Because every time we would gain people, we would lose people. So we put in the virtual nursing program to take the paperwork load off. I can tell you, I went up to the unit, and everyone tells the story because it was very accurate. I went up to the unit and said, so we're going to put in this virtual nursing program. It's super exciting. And the nurses looked, crossed their arms, looked very, like, you know what you can do to help us? You could bring us a real nurse. That's what you can do to help us. And I was like, but I'm bringing you a virtual nurse. And they're like, great. You know what? You can come back when you can really help us. And I was like, okay. And you slink away because you're so excited, right? You're like this little kid in a candy store, all filled with excitement about what you've done, what he built for you, and what you're going to bring to them. 10 days. It was literally 10 days between that and walking up, and I would walk up almost every day. Be like, how's it going? How's it going? Because I was super excited about this. And 10 days later, they were like, I think this is the best thing you've ever done for us. And I was like, whew, I'm just going to leave now. Now. And then I was just grinning from ear to ear because it was, you had finally brought them help. They love it. And if I tried to take that program away today, I'd be in serious trouble. I mean, it is one of the most beloved programs at this institution. And the question then is, what more can we do? So that is a very small number of people in a centralized center helping out thousands of nurses across our system and touching thousands of patients. And what took somebody 45 minutes because they were interrupted all the time now takes, on average, 13 minutes. So you've done it more efficiently, more effectively, and basically helped large groups of people. Now the question of how you translate that into a physician community in the same way, I would say that you probably would be able to tell me how difficult that will probably be.
I have to tell you, Roberta, that's what I've been struck by as I've been able to tour the facility today. All the innovations are focused on data in terms of particularly personalized data. I was fascinated, as we talked about, by the bio button in terms of giving the personal data in a much more productive and continuous way than we're currently thinking about. Is that part of the future of innovation, how we look at data, how we structure data to provide better outcomes for patients?
We are in data, big data, understanding big data, and how to use that for both good and not evil, and really use it to affect the N of one, right? we're in the baby toddler phase, right? We can't even say that we're in elementary school. I refuse to say that because there's so much we don't know rather than what we do know. We know how to gather large amounts of data. We don't always know how to use that to impact the one. And that's, I think, the journey that we all need to go on in healthcare in understanding this. Now, I will say it was really interesting the first few weeks of putting the bio buttons on lots of acute care patients. We learned a few things. You learn each time. First of all, we don't really understand resting heart rates for all of our patients while they're sleeping. Because when we're taking vital signs in the middle of the night or right before they go to sleep, we're jostling them. So we don't really know. So when we were alarming at rates that were probably fairly normal for people who were sleeping.
Sure.
Right? We didn't know that how inaccurate, or I guess we did, but I'm not sure we were totally willing to admit, that we don't always take appropriate respiratory rates, right? And again, not being a clinician, I was learning about the standardization and towards the mean of 16, 18, or 20, depending on which institution you are. And so our doctors were like, oh my God, I'm seeing real respiratory rates. And I was like, oh. And then I had a pulmonologist come up and say, oh, I think we're about to learn how much sleep apnea there is in the population, right? And I was like, and then there's me, right, as the administrator going, what do I do with that? And he was like, not quite sure yet, and
Sure.
I don't know. If I find 20% of my population has sleep apnea, am I supposed to start treating them? Is that what's impacting? What do I do with the information I find? Right? Then there's okay, now we have an opportunity to watch all of this data on acute care patients for when they deteriorate, when they don't. Well, again, what do I do with that information?
I want to come to that point about new algorithms because there's a lot of debate going on right now about the use of AI in healthcare. So a lot of health professionals who say it's a bad thing. There are biases, there are challenges in the transparency of the algorithms, where's the accountability? So some are glass half empty, some are glass half full. Which are you?
Oh, definitely glass half full. I'm probably glass totally full.
How do you make sure all these technologies are not making healthcare more impersonal? You talk about this hard in science. There's an argument if we have too many technologies, too many cool gadgets, that's taken away from the laying of hands on the patient, from the discussion with the patient. Does that ever concern you?
So I would ask you to spend a day at the hospital with me and follow me around, and we'll
I don't know if I could keep up.
Basically count the amount of people carrying stethoscopes and the amount of people that are using information from imaging, scans, labs, versus how many people are laying hands on, right? And I would say to you, you tell me, right? What percent make decisions based on the data, and what percent make decisions based on the examination?
Sure. What can people learn from you in terms of if they want to adopt this perspective of innovation, of technology?
I don't think there's a shallow end to the pool. I think the answer is if you're in the shallow end, you're not truly experiencing what I believe a lot of the technology has to offer.
How do I know if I'm in the shallow end?
If you're too afraid to turn on and turn it off, right? You got to be willing to try it fully and put it through its paces before you say,
But you could
I'm
drown,
willing to
Roberta,
try it.
if you go too far in the deep end, right?
But you never want to create a situation that you can't turn it off,
Okay.
right? You don't suddenly pull out resources. It's not like I walked in and said, you know what I'm going to do when I turn this technology on? I'm going to take half of the resources off the bedside and remove them, right? You leave what's in place, augment, and then say, okay, now I can start to pull back.
Yeah.
Or you're adding something to offer support because you know you're already not able to get to something. Let's pick something, CDMP, right? Which a lot of people have those programs that look through charts and see what is missing from coding. There are very few places that can get to 100% of charts. One of the questions is, how can you use technology to take a look and see what might be missing from all charts, not just the ones your humans can get to because there aren't enough people. There are never enough. We don't have enough Alzheimer's doctors in this society, or rheumatologists, right? How long does it take somebody to get into the right neurology appointment? When you have a scarce resource, the question is, how can you help? And if you find a technology that can help, to put it through its paces, you can't always do that in a simulated environment and say it works or say it doesn't work.
So what will Houston Methodist look like 5 years from now? Will it be very different or just incrementally different?
Hospitals will always have a place, right? It's going to be incrementally different. Now, I think the amount that we are able to monitor centrally, the amount that we're going to be able to provide from centralized hubs, those will grow. And it may grow for Houston Methodist, and we may be able to do that for other people, right? I think that centralization and hubbing things will have a whole new, there was always the thought you had an academic medical center and a series of hubs. Now I think we're also going to have the centralized monitoring center that's hubbed everywhere.
Roberta, thank you for hosting me today.
It's been a pleasure to have you.